This is Chapter 3, Lesson 6, Write Linear Equations. Okay, so when we're writing linear equations, there's a couple of things that we need to know. Okay. So we can write linear equations when we're given a slope and a point. Okay, we can substitute the slope m and the coordinates of the point into the following equation. Y minus y1 equals m. Remember, m was our slope. X minus x2, where y1 and x1 are going to be the points that are given. You could also do write a linear equation when you're given a slope and the y-intercept. You substitute the slope m and y-intercept in y equals mx plus b. Very simple. Remember, b was our y-intercept, m was our slope. You can also write a linear equation when you're given a graph. Okay. I can find the y-intercept b and the slope m from the graph. Then I can substitute the slope and y-intercept in y equals mx plus b. Okay. You can do it when you're given 2 points. You can use the coordinates of the points to find the slope. You can substitute the slope and the coordinates of one of the points in y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 and solve it from there. You can also do it from a table. You can use the coordinates of the 2 points to find the slope, then substitute the slope and coordinates of one of the points in y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we're going to specifically look at point-slope form of a linear equation. So in words, the linear equation y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 is written in point-slope form, where x1, y1 is a given point on a non-vertical line and m is the slope of the line. Okay. So in symbols, y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. Okay? So those are our 2 points. So we're given those 2 points on the line. There's x1, y1's right there, and xy. Okay? So let's look at a couple of examples. So example number 1 says write an equation in point-slope form for the line that passes through -2, 3 with a slope of 4. Okay, so I have my equation y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, and then I substitute in. So here's my y point, here's my x point. Okay, so you can see I have 3. 3 is positive, so I just plug it in. Y minus 3 equals 4, because that's my slope, x minus, and then I'm going to have this in parentheses, this minus 2. Okay, so that's going to be in parentheses. Okay. So then I have y minus 3 equals 4 times x plus 2. Remember from previous lessons, these two negative signs right here next to each other make that positive. Example number 2 says write the slope-intercept form of the equation from example 1. Okay, so we can call that slope-intercept form was when we had y equals mx plus b. So basically we're going to take this equation up here and we're going to solve, so we have y on one side and the x on the other side. Okay, so very first thing I'm going to do is use the distributive property. So y minus 3 equals 4. Remember, I'm distributing that 4 to the x and to the 2. So when I do that, I get 4x. 4 times 2 then gives me 8. And I'm going to add 3 to both sides. This cancels. So I'm left with y equals 4x. 8 plus 3 gave me 11. So y equals 4x plus 11. I can always double check by substituting the coordinates of the given point in the equation. Okay, so I can always substitute back in. I can put 3 back in for y and -2 back in for x. Okay, if I do that, 4 times -2 is -8. -8 plus 11 does give me a +3, so it does work out. Okay. Example number 3 says write an equation in point slope form and slope intercept form for the line that passes through 8, 1 and -2, 9. Okay, so the very first thing that I want to do is I want to actually find the slope. Okay, so I use my slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So here are my two y values. And here are my two x values that I'm given. Okay, so when I do that, I get 9 minus 1. Okay, so 9 minus 1 over -2 minus 8, which simplifies. 9 minus 1 gives me 8. -2 minus 8 gives me -10. So that whole fraction becomes -8/10. I can simplify that, or -4/5. So that's my slope. Okay. From there, I use the slope and the coordinates of either point to write the equation in point slope form. So I'm going to use one of the points. It can be any point that you want. I'm going to use the first point they gave me, 8, 1. So my formula y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So here's my y1, then my x1 over here. Okay. So y minus 1 equals -4/5 x minus 8. Then I can simplify. So the point slope form of the equation is y minus 1 equals -4/5 x minus 8. Then I can solve that equation, and I get y equals -4/5 x plus 37/5. So let's actually go ahead and do that, just so we make sure we know what we're doing. I'm going to come over here. So my formula is y minus 1 equals -4/5 x minus 8. Okay, so I'm going to distribute this 4/5. So I get y minus 1 equals -4/5 x. And then 4/5 times 8, 8 times 4 is 32. It's going to be +32/5. Okay, I'm going to add 1 plus 1, so I get y equals -4/5 x plus 1 I can change to 32 or 5/5, so that gives me 37/5. Okay. So there are a couple of try-it problems below. You have A, B, and C. So go ahead, pause the video, try out the try-it problems, and then we will go over the answers together. All right, now that you've tried out the try-it problems, let's go over the answers together. So letter A says write an equation in point slope form and slope intercept form for the line that passes through -1, 2, and has a slope of -1/2. Okay, so my equation is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, here's my y, here's my x, and then my slope. So I have y minus 2 equals -1/2 x minus a -1, which is y minus 2 equals -1/2 x plus 1. Okay, so there's my slope intercept form, my point slope form. Okay, then I'm going to take this equation and I'm going to solve it or simplify it. Okay, so that means this becomes, I'm going to distribute this -1/2. So I get y minus 2 equals negative 1/2 x minus 1/2, and then I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I get y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3/2. Okay, so I get y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3/2. And those are my two answers. So this is my first answer. That's in point slope form. That's in slope intercept form. Okay. Letter B says write an equation in point slope form and slope intercept form for the line that passes through 3, 0 and 6, -3. So the first thing I need to do is find my slope. So slope is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Here's my two y's and my two x's. So I get -3 minus 0 over 6 minus 3. So my slope is m equals -3 over 3, which equals -1. Okay. So then I can go with my point slope form. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Y minus 0 equals -1x minus 3. So there's my point slope form. Okay, and then I'm going to take that equation, I'm going to simplify it. So this just becomes, because it's y minus 0, this just becomes y. And then I'm going to distribute this, so I get -x plus 3. So here's point slope form and slope intercept form. Okay. Letter C says the cost for making spirit buttons is shown in the table. Write an equation in point slope form to represent the cost y of making x buttons. Okay. So I can make 100 buttons for $25 and 150 buttons for $35. So these are my two coordinates that I'm given. So y is my cost. So this is my y. Number of buttons is my x. So my 2 points are going to be 100, comma 25, and 150, comma 35. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is do my slope. So m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so that means I have 35 minus 25 over 150 minus 100. Okay, so that gives me 10 over 50, which can be simplified. You can divide both of them by 10. So this gives me 1/5. So my slope is 1/5. So I want to put this in slope, point slope form. So y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. So y minus 25 equals m x minus 100. Okay. You could have also done y minus 35 equals 1/5. This should also be 1/5. X, oops, you can't actually see that, sorry. X minus 150. Okay. So either of these would work. Completely up to you, whichever one you would like to use. Because they're both, you can pick either point. It doesn't matter which one you pick. I just picked the first one we had, so. Okay.